So welcome to the assessment module. I'm presenting with Norm Lee from the University of Idaho, and I'm Electra Enslow from University of Washington. And today we're going to cover some key concepts on how to evaluate AI tools for use in academic libraries. And uh, the roadmap for today is we're going to do a quick activity. We'll talk about why assessment matters. We'll talk about some common concepts and how to prioritize. And lastly, we will put some of these concepts into practice by comparing Olama and ChatGPT for building library bots. What I'd like to do is kind of get us thinking about assessment more generally. Um, so what I for this activity, just please take a minute to type what are your associations with assessment in the chat. And the goal for this activity is to activate your prior knowledge about assessment. Um, so yeah, just take a second to think about what assessment is, what it means to you, what words come to mind. Okay, good. Oh, some are coming in. So improvement, uh, let's see, accountability, refinement, feedback, evaluating evaluating current state, iterations on programs after assessment, outreach. Okay, looks like your brains are firing on assessment, identifying gaps for sure. Um, yeah, refinements, refine, adjust. Okay, well, great. Thanks for participating, and please keep putting these in the chat as well. Uh, so let's see. Um, So thank you for participating. And now that you have assessment on the front of your brain, please take it away, Norm.
Yeah, thank you for that, everyone. So, we've talked a lot about some of the challenges and ethics with generative AI. Another reason why assessment matters, you guys have already mentioned in the chat, is it changes really fast. There's a lot of conflicting advice. We need to be able to assess for ourselves based on our institution's individual needs and our particular use case. And some of the conflicting advice I've put up in this slide, everyone says they're using AI, but empirically, if you look at the data, systematic enterprise level adoption is very low. A lot of people report a lot of success with AI, but then when you try to quantify that in terms of savings or like increased profit margins, that's really hard. And then, as we've already discussed, there are some really good reasons why AI sometimes doesn't work and AI adoption can fail. And this is all super new. So there isn't a ton of research on it yet in the library space. But if we don't have a good picture of how AI is affecting academic libraries, how can we talk about assessment sensibly? How can we give advice on assessment to other people? Well, the idea is that whatever assessment workflows you end up working out for your particular institution, there tend to be similar priorities for people who are building or using AI tools, regardless of the context. Everyone wants responses that are truthful. Everyone wants AI tools that are easy to use, etc. So people have developed this set of shared concepts and tools, which sort of can be applied in a customized way across contexts. We're going to show you the concepts today, and a lot of the tools in the empirical literature is linked in the asynchronous module on GitHub. So, if we get started, this first set of concepts is all about how AI performs as a standalone tool. Even if the tool is, too expensive or hard to use practically, we're going to bracket all of that to one side now and just say, if we could somehow, by magic, deploy this tool, how good would it be uh, for the task at hand? First is accuracy. This is what we've been talking about when we talk about hallucinations and things. Relevance, as it's used in the literature, basically means can the tool do the task? For example, a very truthful answer you might get from a chatbot is that I have no idea how to complete the task you're asking me to do. That's truthful, not hallucinated, cool, but it would also be irrelevant. Linguistic fluency is how understandable the outputs are. If it's text, is it grammatical and using the proper tone? If the output is something like code or data analysis, is it explaining and documenting those in a way that is human readable and human interpretable? Robustness and reliability are all about how the tool handles inputs. A fragile, non-robust system forces you to prompt it in the exact right way or provided a file that is formatted like just so, all the details are exactly right. Otherwise, it breaks catastrophically. A robust, reliable system lets the user make some mistakes or be a little bit more flexible without completely breaking the tool. Inclusion and equity is sort of like robustness and reliability, but for the outputs rather than the inputs. So, like, does the tool know how to engage in a variety of different types of reasoning, whether that's mathematical, engineering, humanistic, etc.? Is it unreasonably biased towards the perspectives or the vocabulary or thought processes of a certain group? And safety is a companion to inclusion and equity. Inclusion and equity tends to deal more with implicitly harmful biases, whereas safety, as it's discussed in the literature, often deals with outright obvious harms. For instance, you don't want your AI tool hurling abuse at students or staff. And alternatively, if you feed that AI tool some confidential information, you don't want it to leak that information to someone else. Those sorts of things. Finally, alignment. This can be a little slippery, but it tends to capture whether the LLM acts in ways humans want and expect it to act. Does it reason? Does its reasoning make sense to us? Does it ask us for input and feedback when we want it to? So if you asked an aligned system to help you plan your day, it might look at your calendar and help you triage. But if you asked an unaligned system to help you plan your day, it might autonomously, unilaterally go in and delete all of your appointments to free up your schedule. Both are trying to help you plan your day, but the aligned system does it in ways that we expect or that we at least approve of. This next set of concepts is basically all the things we bracketed and left out in the previous slide. These are things that even if the AI performed perfectly at whatever task we want it to do, maybe there are still some reasons it just doesn't fit with our institution. Cost is fairly straightforward, including everything from how easy it is or how much time it takes staff to actually use the thing, to subscription costs, to energy and hardware costs if you're building your own LLM locally. And this also includes scaling, since the cost of most subscriptions or the energy and hardware that you need tends to increase with more users and more use. Human agency is admittedly two separate points, so I maybe should have broken it out. But the first is to what extent is AI being used to empower rather than disempower people, whether that is through de-skilling from cognitive offloading, whether that is, using it to get rid of rote trivial work so that people can spend more time on meaningful work, that sort of thing. The second sort of aspect of human agency is to what extent is responsibility being delegated to the AI tool instead of humans? After all, the AI is still a tool designed by humans. Yes, it doesn't act deterministically, but we're the ones setting it up and using it. So some human is ultimately responsible for what the AI does. Transparency and customizability then go with that human agency. The idea being if you can't see what's going on with the LLM tool, you can't change it. Um, and if you can't change it, then you're stuck anyway. So that's going to make it much harder for you to make informed decisions about whether it's good for you or your users. And this problem is obviously biggest with vendor purchased software rather than software you build yourself. Finally, we have human alignment again, which might seem a little weird, but this time, instead of acting in ways the individual expects to reach a goal, we're talking about at the institutional level. Now, if the institution and the individual are aligned, there's obviously a lot of overlap between these two, and that's great. But they can come apart. For instance, from an institutional perspective, for ethical and legal reasons, you might want to prevent confidential information from going into the tool. But at the individual level, if someone just has a ton on their plate, they might just want to get things done and not care so much and be a little sloppy about what they put in there. So those two alignments can slip away from each other, and that needs to be monitored. Now, again, that was a lot. That was just a big soporific list. And there's more detail in the course. But remember that assessment is going to be specific to your institution and use case. So you only have to assess using the concepts that are important to you. And if you're pre-purchasing a tool from a vendor, they may have already performed assessment on your behalf. Just make sure it's sufficiently transparent. Um, Nevertheless, picking what to assess can be tricky, so I've put up two different ways to sort of triage your priorities here. Both are pretty quick and easy, but they help create a ranking that's based on more than just vibes. For each one, you might start with ranking the assessment concepts themselves, just as I showed you on the slides. And then as you start working on whatever LLM project you have, you can make those concepts a little bit more specific. So if you're doing a reference chatbot or something, you might start off with accuracy as a must-have in the Moscow method. Even if you don't know exactly what that means yet, then as you get further into the project, you might revise that into something more specific, like, okay, now we know that accuracy means always telling people correct, up-to-date information based on the library's website or something. And of course, as you go through the project and the list gets more concrete, priorities might shift, but having these explicit rankings and explicit ranking methods to come back to and iterate on, like a lot of you were talking in the chat, prevents you from losing the forest for the trees and spending a ton of time and effort on an issue that ultimately might not deserve it. And I'll hand it back to Electra.
Okay, great. So we just heard Norm talk about important concepts in assessing AI, and now we are going to apply these concepts. So let's check out Alama and ChatGPT for building a bot. So we're going to compare them on transparency, usability, and scalability today. So Alama's transparency is a major advantage for libraries that value openness, which we do, obviously. And that advantage is because you can see exactly what model is running, how it's configured, and where the data goes. Where ChatGPT is opaque, it's difficult to verify independently. And for everyday tasks, this might be fine, but for sensitive information like FERPA or HIPAA related data, it does matter. And then usability. So usability is where ChatGPT shines. Works with no effort, open a browser and type. On the other hand, Olama requires more technical skills, but libraries can build simple interfaces over the top of it. So the trade-off for the greater effort in Olama is that the more setup gives you more control over the experience. Okay, so we talked about transparency and usability, and now we'll talk about scalability. And scalability here is about who bears the infrastructure cost and people power for growth. Um, with Olama, um, your library owns the hardware. It's great for control, but scaling means real IT investment, where ChatGPT offloads the entirely to OpenAI, but you pay per use and lose control over where the data goes. So for large organizations and with unpredictable demand spikes, ChatGPT scales much more easily. For small teams, sensitive data, Llama is probably the better fit. And then finally, the point here is not that one tool is better, um, except I think Llama is, but it's that it's that structured assessment helps you figure out which tool fits your context. And this is what the assessment concepts and prioritization methods are for. So, lastly, I'll just depart with think about how they align with you and your library's values. Okay, so thank you for your time. Please feel free to contact us directly with questions, and we're holding questions till the end. So, thank you.